You've probably heard before of the thyroid hormone T3, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through what T3 is, why it's so important to our body, the different things that get impacted when T3 levels are off, and where to start with next steps if you're finding that your T3 levels may be out of range or that you're having some of the symptoms that I mentioned in today's video. Now, let's get into what T3 is. T3 is the active thyroid hormone that our body actually utilizes as really the governor of all speed. So, any process that is regulated by speed, T3 is probably impacting. T3 stands for triiodothyronine is the full name. So if you ever hear that name come up instead of T3, they're the same thing. T3 is just the acronym that we use. And when we're talking about T3, we really care more so about free T3 because that's the active usable form by the body. Total T3 is just implying the total pool of T3, but some of that hormone is bound to proteins in the body, which renders it unusable. So we really care about the free level because that tells us how much of that total pool of T3 is actually available for all of these speed functions that we're going to talk about today. So think of T3 as like the gas pedal on your car and reverse T3 as the brakes. That's really what's happening within the speed system within the body. And T3 is the one that's really going to make you drive the car fast and going to be able to speed up any process in the body. So T3 is important because it finds to thyroid receptors in cells. You have thyroid receptors on many different cells in the body, not just within the thyroid. And these different cells that have thyroid receptors on them, when T3 binds to it, it actually turns on genes that then enhance the speed processes that are occurring. Many of these genes are ones that control things like metabolism, repair, and growth. So let's talk about some of the key systems that T3 impacts and why, if there's not adequate levels of T3, you might be experiencing symptoms in these different systems. The first one we'll talk about is metabolism and energy. T3 is responsible for metabolism or metabolizing the food that we eat and breaking that down and converting that over into usable energy or ATP that our body can then use to run all processes that nutrients are dependent off of. So if we don't have adequate levels of T3, you're typically going to notice more issues with energy and fatigue, but you're also typically going to notice more issues with weight distribution and weight gain because T3 is responsible for really burning that fire of those calories that we put into the body and not just storing that food that we eat for energy. With this, T3 is also responsible for glucose control. And that's one of the reasons why many individuals that have low free T3 levels or things like hypothyroidism are typically going to notice more abnormalities within blood sugar. You typically notice that you have a higher resting blood sugar, a higher A1C, and probably more glucose excursion, so more glucose surges after eating meals that maybe don't spike other people because there's just not enough that T3 there to be able to help with the glucose metabolism process and to help with insulin sensitivity. Insulin is that hormone that helps us pull that glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cells that are dependent off of it. So T3, like I mentioned, is very important for metabolism. It's also important for just overall energy function, and it supports mitochondrial energy production. So if we don't have enough T3, oftentimes we can experience issues like chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue syndrome is actually caused by mitochondrial dysfunction, and T3 is part of what causes mitochondrial dysfunction. T3 is also needed to be able to help our body detoxify. So if we don't have enough T3, our body may not be detoxifying well, and that can also then impact mitochondrial function. Mitochondrial function is a key buzzword that we throw around in the functional medicine discussion because it's a really important piece to our ability to feel well. It's a key piece to hormone function. Our hormone conversion process of sex hormones actually happens within our mitochondria. So sometimes when we see issues with sex hormone levels, it can be due to mitochondrial dysfunction. I have many other videos talking more about mitochondrial dysfunction that would be a great follow-up item to this. But mitochondrial dysfunction can sometimes occur from exposures to things like mold and heavy metals or from nutritional deficiency. We also have T3 receptors on our brain, right? When there is low free T3 levels, we are at increased risk of depression. We also are at increased risk of things like migraines and headaches because we need enough energy within the brain to be able to prevent things like migraines and headaches. T3 is essential for mood regulation. T3 also helps with neurotransmitter function, and individuals that have lower T3 levels typically also have imbalances within neurotransmitters, particularly ones like GABA, which are more of those relaxing and calming neurotransmitters. And so you may also experience feelings of anxiety if we don't have adequate levels of GABA. T3 is a known driver of depression. If you look at some of the brain energy theories behind depression, we are starting to learn more and more about this. The thyroid is also responsible for controlling the speed of digestion and gut motility. So, if we don't have adequate T3 levels, we can see more issues present with constipation as well as bloating. And we see a higher recurrence rate of something like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth because when food that we're eating isn't digesting, there leaves more time for that food to ferment, which then causes those bacteria to then overgrow. This can then lead to symptoms like chronic bloating, flatulence or farting, burping, as well as even heartburn and reflux. T3 also regulates fertility and ovulation, and without adequate levels of free T3, we're generally going to see issues with anovulatory cycles or cycles where we're ovulating but not making adequate progesterone. Thyroid hormones help actually sensitize the body to the utilization of progesterone. And so, a common effect we see with low levels of free T3 is something called luteal phase defect, where there's not adequate progesterone coming from the corpus luteum between ovulation and the start of the next period. And this can then lead to issues with progesterone imbalances of estrogen. And this can cause things like PMS or PMDD, but it can also drive situations like infertility and difficulty conceiving. Finally, free T3 also impacts the growth of our hair, our skin, and our nails. And so if we have inadequate levels of free T3, we're typically going to see issues with more hair shedding, as well as decreased hair regrowth, as well as drier skin, and sometimes even issues with acne because of the overdrying, and potentially also slowed nail growth or very weak and brittle nails. So as you can see, T3 is essential for all of these different processes that are regulated by speed in the body. T3 also regulates the speed of detoxification. And so we are going to typically see more issues with detoxification of things like mold, as well as cholesterol and any type of environmental toxin when T3 is low. And this is always something we take into account with any of our patients that we work with that are going through a detoxification protocol. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of times when people go through these, they can sometimes get sicker when there are low thyroid hormone levels, because we actually need to support the thyroid and mitochondrial function before we can really ask the body to detoxify. The body needs energy to be able to detoxify, and T3 gives our body that energy that we need. If you want to learn more about free T3 and how T3 can be a bottleneck into your symptoms and why you're still experiencing thyroid symptoms, even though you might already be on thyroid hormone replacement, I have a free workshop called the T3 Bottleneck, where I teach you my easy 4-part framework for exactly where to start and what drives low free T3 levels. You can sign up for the workshop with the link below. And if you want to know when I release a new video here on YouTube, be sure to hit the bell to subscribe to my channel so that you'll be notified each time that I do.